This happened a few years ago on Christmas. I was driving through the snow-covered roads of Wisconsin, heading to my older brother Michael's place for the holiday party. At the time, I was 28 years old and had just gone through one of the hardest years of my life. My divorce had been finalized 2 months earlier, and honestly, I was still pretty messed up about it. Michael had been the one who kept telling me to fight for my marriage, to work things out. But some things just can't be fixed. As I drove, watching the snowflakes hit my windshield, I kept thinking about how good it would feel to be around family again. Michael and his wife Sarah had 2 kids, Emily who was 5 and Tommy who was 3. I hadn't seen them in months, and the thought of their little faces lighting up when they opened presents was the only thing keeping me going. I was ready for a normal, peaceful Christmas. I had no idea what I was about to walk into. When I pulled up to Michael's house around 6 in the evening, the place looked perfect. White Christmas lights lined the roof and wrapped around the porch railings. The 2-story farmhouse-style home had this warm glow coming from inside. I grabbed the presents from my trunk and walked up to the front door. Sarah answered with a big smile. "Come in, Jake. It's freezing out there." She pulled me into a hug, but I noticed right away that she looked tired. There were dark circles under her eyes, and when her sleeve rode up a bit, I saw what looked like a small bruise on her forearm. She quickly tugged her sleeve down. I didn't say anything, but it stuck with me. Inside, the house smelled incredible. Roasted turkey, mashed potatoes, something sweet baking in the oven. The living room had this massive Christmas tree decorated with ornaments and tinsel. Emily and Tommy were wearing matching red and green pajamas, running around excitedly. My parents were already there, sitting on the couch. My younger sister Lisa and her husband had just arrived too. A few of Michael and Sarah's friends were scattered around, holding drinks and laughing. Michael came over and clapped me on the back. "Good to see you, man. Help yourself to a drink." He gestured toward the kitchen counter where several bottles of wine and beer were lined up. I noticed he already had a beer in his hand, and from the flush on his face, it wasn't his first. For the first couple hours, everything seemed fine. We ate dinner, the kids opened a few early presents, and everyone was having a good time. My mom kept complimenting Sarah on how beautiful the house looked and how delicious the food was. Sarah smiled and thanked her, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. Michael kept refilling his beer, then switched to wine, then grabbed a bottle of whiskey. He was drinking faster than everyone else. At one point, he started telling this story about something stupid Sarah had done at the grocery store, forgetting to buy cranberry sauce. It should have been a light-hearted joke, but the way he told it felt mean. He kept going on about it, and Sarah's smile got tighter and tighter. My dad tried to change the subject, asking Michael about work, but Michael ignored him and poured another drink. As the night went on and it got darker outside, the atmosphere in the house shifted. Michael's voice got louder. His words started slurring together. He knocked over a glass of red wine and it spilled across the white tablecloth. Sarah jumped up immediately with napkins, trying to clean it up. "Watch what you're doing," Michael snapped at her. "You're so clumsy." She didn't say anything, just kept wiping. Lisa leaned over and whispered to me, "Sarah told me last week she wants to leave him." I looked at my sister, shocked. Lisa nodded toward Michael, who was now pouring himself another generous helping of whiskey. "It's been bad for a while," Lisa continued. I didn't know what to say. I watched as Michael downed his drink and started criticizing one of his friends for something trivial. The friend, a guy named David, laughed it off at first, but Michael wouldn't let it go. He got more aggressive, louder. Little Tommy started crying. The sound of his dad yelling scared him. Sarah picked Tommy up and tried to soothe him, but Michael turned on her. "Don't baby him like that. You're making him weak." His voice was harsh, cutting. Several people in the room went quiet. My mom looked at my dad with worried eyes. David stood up and tried to take the whiskey bottle from Michael's hand. "I think you've had enough, buddy." Michael shoved him hard. David stumbled backward and hit the wall. That's when everything fell apart. Sarah's voice cracked as she spoke up. "Please, everyone should go home. I'm so sorry." People started gathering their coats. My parents took Emily, who was sobbing now, and tried to comfort her. Lisa and her husband rushed toward the door. I wanted to stay and help Sarah, but my dad grabbed my arm. "Let him sleep it off, Jake. There's nothing you can do right now." I looked back and saw Sarah holding both kids, tears streaming down her face. Michael had collapsed into a chair, the whiskey bottle still in his grip. He was yelling at everyone to get out, that nobody appreciated him. As we walked to our cars, my dad said quietly, "I'm scared something terrible is going to happen one day." I couldn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about Sarah and those kids stuck in that house with Michael. The next morning, Christmas Day, I woke up to a text from Michael. It just said, "Come over. Open presents with the kids. Sarah's sorry about last night." I stared at my phone, unsure what to do. Part of me didn't want to go back there, but I kept thinking about Emily and Tommy. They didn't deserve to have their Christmas ruined. So I got dressed and drove back over. When I arrived around 9, the snow was still falling lightly. Sarah's car was in the driveway, but I didn't see any other vehicles. I walked up to the door and knocked. Michael opened it with this huge grin on his face. It looked forced, unnatural. "Jake, come in, come in." He was wearing a red Christmas sweater and holding a coffee mug. I stepped inside and immediately noticed the house was a mess. Broken glass from last night was still on the floor. Empty bottles everywhere. But what really caught my attention was Sarah. She was sitting on the couch in the corner of the living room wearing a long dark dress. She had large sunglasses on, covering half her face. Her hands were folded neatly on her lap and she was sitting perfectly straight. She didn't move, she didn't say anything. Emily and Tommy were sitting by the Christmas tree, but they looked scared. Their eyes were red like they'd been crying. I walked closer. "Sarah," I called out. No response. Michael came up beside me, still smiling. "She's got a bad headache from last night. Just let her rest." I frowned. "Why is she wearing sunglasses inside?" Michael laughed, but it sounded hollow. "The light bothers her eyes. She took some sleeping pills. She'll be fine." Something felt very wrong. I tried to focus on the kids. I sat down near the tree and picked up a present. "Come on, Emily, let's see what you got." Emily looked at her mom, then at me. "Mommy won't talk to me," she whispered. I glanced back at Sarah. She hadn't moved an inch. Michael kept encouraging us. "Open the presents. Come on, it's Christmas. Let's have fun." His voice was too cheerful, too insistent. I opened a gift for Emily, some kind of doll, but she barely reacted. I stood up and walked over to Sarah again. I reached out slowly and touched her shoulder. She was cold, really cold. My heart started pounding. "Michael, something's wrong with Sarah. We need to call someone." Michael's smile didn't fade. "She's just tired, Jake. She needs to rest." I looked at Sarah more carefully. Her skin had a grayish tint to it. Her hands looked stiff. I bent down and tried to listen for her breathing. Nothing. I felt panic rising in my chest. I told Emily and Tommy to go upstairs and play in their room. They hesitated, but eventually they went. As soon as they were gone, I turned to Michael. "We need to call 911 right now." Michael shook his head. "No, no, she's fine. Just leave her alone." I pulled out my phone, my hands shaking. Michael tried to grab it from me, but I stepped back. I dialed 911 and gave them the address. Michael started packing, running his hands through his hair. The operator asked me what was wrong. "I think someone's dead," I said, my voice barely steady. Michael broke down. He fell to his knees and started sobbing. "She's dead, Jake. She's been dead since last night." I felt like I was going to be sick. I walked over to Sarah and carefully removed her sunglasses. Her eyes were open, staring at nothing. Lifeless. I stumbled backward and vomited in the corner of the room. The ambulance and police arrived within minutes. 2 paramedics rushed in and checked Sarah. One of them looked at me and shook his head. "She's been deceased for several hours." The police started asking Michael questions. He was crying, barely able to speak. "When did you know your wife was dead?" one officer asked. "Last night," Michael choked out. "Around 2 in the morning." I stared at him in horror. "Then why did you have the kids opening presents this morning?" Michael looked at me with red, swollen eyes. "I just wanted one normal Christmas. I wanted them to be happy." The officer's expression hardened. "Sir, we're going to need you to come with us." The investigation moved quickly. The police found bruising around Sarah's neck. Michael eventually confessed to everything. He said they'd been fighting all night after everyone left. He'd been drinking heavily and Sarah told him she wanted a divorce. He lost control and strangled her. After she died, he panicked. But instead of calling for help, he carried her body to the couch, propped her up, put sunglasses on her to hide her eyes, and pretended everything was fine. He said he wanted the kids to have one last good Christmas morning before everything fell apart. He texted me to come over because he couldn't handle being alone with what he'd done. Michael was arrested and charged with second-degree murder. Emily and Tommy were placed in the care of my parents and me. I had to testify in court about what I saw that morning. It was the hardest thing I've ever had to do. I kept thinking about how I'd left the night before. If I'd stayed, if I'd done something, maybe Sarah would still be alive. The guilt ate at me for months. I started seeing a therapist to deal with what I'd witnessed. During the trial, more details came out. Sarah had called the police on Michael twice in the past 3 years for domestic violence, but she dropped the charges both times. Friends testified that she'd been planning to leave him but was afraid of how he'd react. Michael was sentenced to 25 years in prison. In his final statement, he said, "I just wanted my kids to have a happy Christmas." The judge responded coldly, "You made your children open presents in front of their dead mother's body." There is no justification for that. Emily is 7 now and she still has nightmares. Tommy doesn't remember much, but he's scared of loud noises and gets anxious around the holidays. My parents and I are doing everything we can to give them a stable, loving home. As for me, I haven't celebrated Christmas since that day. I can't. Every time I see Christmas lights or hear holiday music, I'm back in that living room, looking at Sarah sitting on that couch, dead for hours while her husband forced us to pretend everything was okay. I'll never forget the sight of her lifeless eyes when I took those sunglasses off. And I'll never forgive myself for leaving her alone with him that night. This happened last Christmas Eve at Union Station. My sister Sarah and I were supposed to catch the last train home to see our parents. The station was packed with holiday travelers, everyone rushing with suitcases and shopping bags. Sarah was 16 and I was 28. She wanted to grab something to eat from the food court before our train arrived. I told her to stay close, not to wander off. The place was chaos. She promised she would be quick, just 5 minutes. I stood there checking my phone, replying to a text from Mom asking when we'd arrive. When I looked up, Sarah was gone. I walked toward the food court, scanning every face in the crowd. My heart started beating faster. I checked the pretzel stand, the coffee shop, the sandwich place. Nobody had seen a girl in a red coat. I called her phone. It rang and rang. No answer. Panic crept into my chest like cold water. I started walking faster, then jogging, calling her name. People stared at me. 10 minutes passed, then 15. My hands were shaking when I finally ran to the security office. An older guard named Frank was sitting behind the desk. I could barely get the words out. My sister, she's 16, red coat, brown hair, she was getting food and now I can't find her. Frank stood up immediately, asked me to calm down and describe her again. I was in the middle of explaining when the loudspeaker crackled to life overhead. "Attention all passengers. A station employee has been found unconscious in the maintenance area. Medical personnel are responding. Please remain calm." Frank's face changed. He muttered something about that area being restricted. Nobody should be back there. My stomach dropped. I asked him if he could check the cameras. He nodded and turned to the monitor wall behind him. Frank pulled up the footage from 20 minutes ago. I stood behind him, eyes glued to the screens. There she was, Sarah standing near a bakery looking at her phone. Then a man in a station employee uniform walked up to her. He was saying something. Sarah nodded. She followed him down a hallway marked employees only. I pointed at the screen. "That's her. That's Sarah. Call that employee. Get him on the radio." Frank leaned closer to the screen, squinting. Then his face went pale. He said, "That uniform, that's Jerry's uniform. He's the one they just found unconscious." I felt my blood turn to ice. "What do you mean?" I asked. Frank explained that Jerry had been attacked about 30 minutes ago. Someone took his uniform. The man on the screen wasn't an employee. He was pretending to be one. Frank grabbed his radio to call the police. I asked where that hallway led. He said it went to the storage areas and the old maintenance tunnels under the station. I didn't wait for him to finish. I ran. Frank yelled after me to wait, that I couldn't go alone, but I didn't care. That was my sister back there. I shoved through the employee's only door and into a dimly lit hallway. The fluorescent lights flickered. The air smelled like oil and dust. I ran past stacks of boxes and old equipment. Then I heard it. Sarah's voice, muffled but unmistakable. "Help! Somebody help me!" I sprinted toward the sound and kicked open a door to a large storage room. Sarah was there. A man had her by the hair, dragging her toward an emergency exit at the far end. She was crying, trying to pull away. The man turned and saw me. He yanked a knife from his back pocket and pressed it against Sarah's throat. "Stay back or I'll hurt her," he snarled. Sarah's eyes were wide with terror. "Please, I just want to go home," she sobbed. I raised my hand slowly. Okay, just don't hurt her." I stayed about 10 feet away. The man's eyes darted around the room, looking for an escape route. I kept my eyes on Sarah, trying to tell her without words that I was going to get her out of this. I forced my voice to stay calm. "Look, you need to get out of here, right?" The man glared at me. "What's your point?" I took a breath. "Let her go, take me instead. I'm older, stronger. Bet her hostage." Sarah screamed, "No, don't." I looked at her. "It's okay, Sarah." The man hesitated, looking between us. "How do I know you won't try something? Because she's my sister, my only family. I won't risk her life." My voice cracked. "The cops are coming. You need to move fast." He thought about it for a few seconds, then nodded. "Fine, but you try anything, I'll kill you both." He shoved Sarah toward me. She ran into my arms, shaking violently. I hugged her tight, then whispered in her ear, "Run back to Frank's office. Tell them where I am." Sarah pulled back, tears streaming down her face. "I can't leave you. You have to. I'll be fine. Go, now." She hesitated, then turned and ran for the door. But right then, footsteps echoed in the hallway. Frank and 2 other security guards burst in. The man grabbed me by the collar and pressed the knife against my throat. "Nobody moves or he dies." Frank raised his hands. "Easy now. Nobody wants anyone hurt." The man dragged me backward toward the emergency exit. "Back off, all of you." One of the guards held Sarah back as she tried to run toward me. We went through the exit into another corridor, then out into the main terminal. People saw us and screamed. Police officers were already there, forming a perimeter around us but keeping their distance. An officer spoke through a megaphone. "Let him go. We can talk about this." The man laughed bitterly. "There's nothing to talk about." He pulled me toward the freight elevator that led down to the train platforms below. I could see Sarah in the crowd, crying. Frank stood next to her, trying to comfort her. My heart ached, but I had to focus. The police followed but didn't get too close. The man forced me into the old freight elevator. It was big and industrial, with metal walls and a cargo cart in the corner. There was a long metal pry bar mounted on the wall, used for holding the door open when loading equipment. The man hit the button. The door started closing. The man turned toward the narrowing gap in the door, watching the cops. He was grinning. "They think they're so smart." He kept staring out at them. "I'm getting out of here and there's nothing you can do." The knife loosened just slightly from my neck. He was distracted, drunk on his own victory. This was my only chance. I looked around quickly. The pry bar on the wall, one end had a sharp hook. My heart pounded in my ears. I shoved the man forward with everything I had. He stumbled and the knife slipped from his hand, clattering on the floor. I grabbed the pry bar and yanked it free. He spun around, lunging at me. I swung the bar. The hooked end caught him in the shoulder. He screamed and fell back. I hit the emergency stop button. The doors jerked back open. Police rushed in immediately. They slammed the man to the ground and cuffed him. I dropped the pry bar, my whole body shaking. An officer asked if I was okay. I nodded, but my legs felt like water. They helped me out of the elevator. Sarah broke free from the crowd and ran to me. She crashed into my chest, sobbing. "I thought I lost you." I held her tight. "I'm okay. We're okay." Frank walked over and put a hand on my shoulder. That was incredibly brave and incredibly stupid. I managed a weak smile. "Yeah, I know." The police took the man away. He was still yelling threats. A detective came over and told us the man was an escaped convict. He'd been hiding in the station for 3 days, attacked Jerry to steal his uniform, and planned to take a hostage to get out of the city. Sarah was still trembling. I guided her to a bench and we sat down. "I'm so sorry." I should have stayed with you, she said. I shook my head. It's not your fault. I shouldn't have let you go alone. I wiped her tears. Hey, we're safe now. That's what matters. She looked at me with red eyes. Were you scared? I didn't lie to her. Terrified. I thought I might not see you again. But you saved me, and I'd do it again, 100 times. We sat there for a while, just holding each other. Frank came back and said our original train was canceled, but there was another one leaving in an hour. We decided to wait. As we sat there, I looked around at the Christmas decorations in the station. The twinkling lights, the huge tree near the entrance, everything looked different now. Sarah rested her head on my shoulder. This was supposed to be a happy Christmas. I put my arm around her. It is. We're together. We're alive. That's the best gift. When the train finally arrived, we boarded and found our seats. As the train pulled out of the station, I stared out the window at the city lights fading behind us. I knew this night would stay with me forever, not because of the fear, but because I learned something important. Love makes you capable of things you never thought possible, even when you're terrified, even when every instinct tells you to run. You stay, you fight, you protect the people who matter most. Sarah fell asleep on my shoulder as the train rolled through the darkness toward home. I closed my eyes and finally let myself breathe. My name is Marcus, and what happened to me last Christmas still makes me check my locks 3 times every night. I was staying at my older brother's apartment in Denver while he was deployed overseas. He asked me to house sit for 2 weeks and keep an eye on the place. The building was one of those newer complexes near the university district. Most residents were students who had gone home for winter break. By December 20th, I had the entire 3rd floor practically to myself. I thought it would be relaxing. I was wrong. It started on my first night there, around 9 in the evening. I was sitting on the couch watching some show on Netflix and eating leftover pizza from earlier. The apartment was quiet except for the TV. Then I heard it, a knock at the door. But it wasn't a normal knock. It followed a rhythm. Tap, 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 tap. Like someone was playing out the tune to "We Wish You a Merry Christmas" on the door. I muted the TV and got up. When I looked through the peephole, I saw a woman standing in the hallway. She looked to be around 40 years old with long, messy hair that hung past her shoulders. She wore a thin jacket that didn't look warm enough for December in Colorado. What struck me most was her expression. She was smiling. Not a big smile, just a slight one, like she was amused by something. I opened the door a crack and asked, "Can I help you?" She tilted her head slightly. "I'm looking for Sarah," she said in a quiet voice. "There's no Sarah here," I told her. "This is my brother's place. I'm just staying here while he's away." She kept smiling. "Oh, my mistake." Then she turned and walked down the hallway toward the stairs. I closed the door and went back to the couch. Something about the interaction felt off, but I figured she probably just had the wrong apartment number. The building had over 100 units. It happened. Still, I couldn't shake the uncomfortable feeling in my gut. I tried to focus on the show but kept glancing at the door. About 30 minutes later, the knocking came again. Same rhythmic pattern. Tap, 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 tap. This time it went on longer, maybe 15 or 20 seconds. I walked to the door but didn't open it. I just looked through the peephole. It was the same woman, but now she wasn't smiling. She just stood there completely still, staring directly at the peephole like she knew I was watching. I felt my chest tighten. I didn't say anything. I just waited, hoping she would leave. After about 2 minutes of standing there, she knocked again. This time softer, almost like she was playing piano keys. Gentle little taps. I couldn't take it anymore. "You need to leave," I said through the door, my voice firmer than before. "There's no Sarah here." "But she told me to come," the woman replied. "She said you'd be here." My stomach dropped. Nobody knew I was staying here except my family and a couple close friends. How could this stranger know I was here? And who was Sarah? "I don't know what you're talking about," I said. "Please leave or I'll call building security." There was silence for a moment. Then I heard her footsteps, slow and deliberate, moving down the hallway. but they kept stopping every few steps, like she was pausing to listen or look at something. Finally, the sounds faded. I immediately locked the chain latch on the door and made sure the deadbolt was secure. I texted a couple friends about what happened, partly to document it and partly just to feel less alone. They told me it was probably just some confused person, maybe drunk or on something. That made sense. I tried to convince myself of that. I was getting ready for bed around midnight. I was in the bathroom brushing my teeth when I heard something from the hallway outside the apartment. It wasn't knocking this time. It was a dragging sound, like someone was pulling something heavy across the floor. I turned off the water and stood still, listening. The dragging sound moved slowly past my door. It was steady and deliberate. I crept to the front door and carefully looked through the peephole. The woman was there again. She was pulling a large black suitcase behind her. It rolled slowly on its wheels as she walked at a snail's pace down the hallway. Then she stopped, right in front of my door. She turned her head and looked directly at the peephole. That same slight smile returned to her face. I stepped back from the door, my heart pounding. She didn't knock. She just stood there for about a minute. Then she continued dragging the suitcase down the hall until I couldn't see her anymore. I waited another 10 minutes listening. Nothing. I checked my phone and thought about calling building security. But what would I say? That someone was walking in the hallway with a suitcase. That wasn't against any rules. Maybe she actually lived here and was moving in or out. Maybe I was overreacting. But I didn't feel like I was overreacting. Everything about this felt wrong. I went to my brother's room and grabbed the aluminum baseball bat he kept in his closet. I brought it into the guest bedroom where I was sleeping and locked the door from the inside. I told myself I was being paranoid, but I kept the bat next to the bed anyway. I woke up at 2 in the morning. Something had pulled me out of sleep. Then I heard it. Footsteps, not in the hallway, inside the apartment. I lay completely still, barely breathing. Someone was walking around in the living room. I could hear their shoes on the hardwood floor. Light steps, moving from the couch area toward the kitchen. I slowly reached for my phone on the nightstand and switched it to silent mode. My hands were shaking. The footsteps stopped. Then I heard the refrigerator door open. The light hum of the fridge filled the quiet apartment. How did she get in? I knew I had locked the front door. I had put the chain latch on. There was no way someone could have gotten through that without making a ton of noise. The fridge door closed. The footsteps started again. They were getting closer to the bedroom. I sat up in bed and gripped the baseball bat with both hands. The footsteps stopped right outside the bedroom door. 30 seconds of complete silence. My pulse was so loud in my ears I thought she might hear it. Then 3 soft knocks on the bedroom door. Tap, 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 following that same rhythm. "I'm calling the police right now," I shouted as loud as I could. Immediately the footsteps rushed away from the door. I heard them running through the living room. Then the front door opened and slammed shut. I waited 5 full minutes before I opened the bedroom door. I turned on every single light in the apartment. My hands were still shaking as I walked to the front door. The deadbolt was locked. The chain latch was still in place. I stared at it, completely confused. How did she get in? And more importantly, how did she get out with the chain still latched? I checked every window in the apartment. All closed and locked. Nothing made sense. I walked to the kitchen and noticed the refrigerator door was slightly open, just a crack. I pulled it open all the way and my blood went cold. Sitting on the middle shelf was a small red box with a white bow, a Christmas present. I had never seen it before. My brother definitely hadn't left it there. I took a photo of it with my phone and immediately sent it to my brother through the messaging app we used. "Did you leave this?" I typed. 20 minutes later, he responded. The time difference meant it was morning where he was stationed. "No, what is that? What's going on?" I quickly explained about the woman. He told me to call the police immediately. I dialed the non-emergency police line and reported a break-in. While I waited for them to arrive, I looked around the apartment more carefully. That's when I saw it. On the living room mirror, written in what looked like condensation or moisture, were 3 words: "I'll be back." I felt like I was going to be sick. The police said they would send someone, but it might take 15 to 20 minutes. I sat in the living room with the bat across my lap, watching the door. Every small sound made me jump. Then the landline phone rang. My brother had an old landline that he barely used. The sudden ringing in the silent apartment nearly made me drop the bat. I stared at the phone on the side table. After 4 rings, I picked it up. "You shouldn't have called them." It was her voice, the woman. "Who are you?" I demanded. "What do you want?" "I just wanted to give you a present," she said calmly. "Sarah would have wanted that." "There's no Sarah here," I said, gripping the phone tighter. "You have the wrong place." She laughed softly. "I know, but you're here and that's enough." The line went dead. I dropped the phone and backed toward the door. Then the pounding started. Loud, aggressive banging on the front door. Not rhythmic this time, just constant, violent hammering. "Let me in, let me in," the woman screamed from the other side. "I left something inside." I pulled out my cell phone and dialed 911 with shaking fingers. The operator answered, and I tried to explain what was happening, but I could barely get the words out over the sound of the pounding. Then I heard another voice, a man's voice. "Open the door," he yelled. There were 2 of them, maybe more. The pounding got worse, like they were using their fists and maybe kicking the door too. I pressed myself into the corner of the room, holding the bat up, telling the operator to hurry. And then just like that it stopped. Complete silence. I didn't move, I didn't even breathe loudly. I waited. The police arrived about 5 minutes later. I heard them announce themselves before I opened the door. 2 officers stood in the hallway. I was shaking so badly I could barely explain what happened. They checked the entire hallway floor. Nobody was there. We went down to the security office and looked at the camera footage. The cameras showed the woman entering the elevator at 2:15 in the morning, but they never showed her leaving. There was no footage of any man at all. The officers came back to the apartment and I showed them the message on the mirror. One of them took photos for the report. Then I opened the fridge to show them the present. It was gone. The red box had completely disappeared. The officer looked at me like he wasn't sure what to believe. I showed him the photo on my phone. He nodded and wrote something in his notebook. They told me they would increase patrols in the area and suggested I get the locks changed and install a security camera. After they left, I couldn't stay there alone. I called my best friend Jake, and he drove over to spend the rest of the night. The next morning, I packed a bag and checked into a hotel. I stayed there until my brother came home 2 weeks later. When I told him everything, he searched the apartment thoroughly. That's when he found it. The balcony door had small scratches near the lock, like someone had used a tool to jimmy it open. She must have gotten in that way. I never stayed at that apartment alone again. To this day, I don't know who that woman was or what she really wanted. And every time I hear a knock following a rhythm, I feel that same cold fear in my chest.